A couple of people have asked me for some instructions as to what to do when they get their Armattan quad, and questions have to do with the radio settings and the KK2 board. So what I'm going to do now is just going to run you through a few things that you need to keep in mind that you need to do when you receive this in order to be successful and as far as getting your maiden flight going well with this. First, let's talk about the radio. Of course, not everyone will have the same radio, but there's some things that will be the same for all radios. The first thing you want to do is set all your trims and sub-trims to 0, so you don't want any trims on this. The second thing you want to do is you want to probably want to start a new model on the radio. I know that some guys use an airplane model. I don't. I use a helicopter model because that's just what I'm used to flying. Perhaps airplane model will be better because a lot of radios, if you select a helicopter model, the stunt mode switch here, normal, stunt 1, stunt 2. When you go to stunt 1 and stunt 2, a lot of the models, helicopter models, even when you start a new model, it's going to be set to 100% throttle. So if you were to fly and hit that switch by mistake, and you didn't think about setting up your throttle curve, your quad is going to go 100% throttle, and that's a disaster essentially. So for me, I use a helicopter model. So the first thing I want to do on my radio is set my throttle curve for normal, stunt mode 1, stunt mode 2. And what you want is a throttle curve, a linear throttle curve. It's going to look like this, essentially. Where basically these are your percentage for throttle input, and over on this side is going to be your stick, right, from 100% up here, 0% here, and you want a nice linear throttle curve going from 0 to 100%. Essentially 0% when the stick is in the all the way down position, 100% throttle when the stick is up. And you want to set that 3 times on normal mode, stunt mode 1, stunt mode 2. Me, I use about something that's more like this, very steep, and what this does is giving me a very aggressive throttle response. So you can play with that if you want. What you do is you just change your throttle curve. The higher points on your throttle curve, you set them to 100%. So for me, for example, this point, this point, and this point are all set to 100%. So from here to here, basically it's a steeper throttle curve is what it is. The next thing you want to do is most radios that are programmable will have a gear switch, and on the KK2 board, the way it's set up is, and the way I've got it wired when I ship it out, is it's plugged in so that if you get your gear switch active, when you flick the gear switch on, this is going to activate auto level mode on the KK2 board. And gear switch off, then you're into stunt mode or just normal mode, I guess. So you want to make your gear switch active. One more thing, which is not necessary, but I recommend doing it. Most radio will have a throttle hold switch. You want to get that working, whereas if you hit the throttle hold, that cuts the throttle, right? And essentially I get used to using this all the time. So if I'm just about to crash, I hit the switch, and this is saving damage to my propellers and motors and whatnot. And also, if I do any kind of work on a quadcopter, even just program the KK2 or look at it, go near it with my hand, I got the throttle switch on, like basically throttle hold switch on, so that there's not going to be any throttle going to the motors. That's for safety purposes. So as far as the radio is concerned, one more thing, to arm the KK2 board, you need to be in the throttle in the low position and go to the right position, hold it there for about 2 seconds. If it doesn't arm for you, it could be a variety of things. First, perhaps your end point on your rudder, this is the rudder left and right, are not high enough, right? So, because that's another thing you want to do, you want to set all your end points to 100%. Right, so elevator, aileron, 100%, throttle, 100% endpoint, rudder, 100% endpoint. You set all that to 100%. You're not going to need to touch that anymore. further adjustments to the way the quadcopter flies will be done on the flight controller itself, not in the radio. So if it doesn't arm, another reason why it may not arm, it could be that your channel is reversed. And we're going to talk about that when I talk in about the KK2 board in a minute here, which I think we're right about here. So as far as the KK2 board is concerned, when you get your quad, you're going to have to do a few things. The first thing you're going to want to do is do a sensor calibration, and this is very, very easy. You plug in your battery and you scroll down the menu on the KK2 board, and then you're going to see sensor test, which you don't need to worry about that. Then you're going to see sensor calibration. What you do is you make sure the quadcopter is on a level surface, you hit continue, and it's going to record these numbers of what angle the quadcopter is, and it's going to use these numbers in the future to keep the quadcopter in that position when it's in the air. And all it's going to do is going to take about 4 or 5 seconds, then it'll say continue, you hit continue, it'll say calibration successful, hit continue, you're done. The next thing you want to do is calibrate the ESCs, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. Essentially, you want to turn on your radio first. Turn on your radio, and then you put your throttle on full position. Now it's a bit tricky because there's 4 buttons on the KK2 board. You need to hold the 2 end buttons together at the same time while you plug in the battery, and then you wait, right? It will say ESC calibrating on the LCD screen. You wait for a beep, and then after that what you do is you just lower the throttle stick back to position, and you're going to hear a confirmation beep. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. The way I do it is I use 2 fingers on the buttons, and I hold with my index and my thumb, I hold the battery plug, and with 2 other fingers I push down on the buttons. Now, there's something I'm doing now that you really shouldn't be doing, but I don't have time, I'm in a hurry. You should not be doing that with the propellers installed. Although I've done it a million times, the chances of these going off are next to none, but you shouldn't do work like this on this with the propellers installed. So here you go, I push the 2 end buttons, hold the battery plug, my throttle is on 100% throttle, I push this. It says it's calibrating. I lower my throttle to 0, and now you heard 1 beep, right? It's not good. It didn't work. I unplug, go back to 100% on the radio, push the 2 buttons, plug the battery, lower the throttle. You heard the 3 beeps, beep, beep, beep. Now it's done, now I'm calibrated. So that's it. The reason why it didn't work the first time, probably one of my finger released the button at one point, and basically it just didn't work. You need to hear these 3 confirmation beep from the Simon K ESCs, and that's telling you that it's calibrated. Next thing you want to do now is go into the KK2 board menu and scroll down to stick scaling. Basically, stick scaling in stock settings is about 30%, and sorry, at 30, the figure is 30, and do not try to go and do acrobatics with this. At 30 it won't work. When I test the quadcopter before I ship it, I set it up all the way to 115, which is a very aggressive setup, and I ship it like that because some people want to have my settings. However, if you're not an experienced pilot, you are going to crash with those settings. So what you do is you're going to stick scaling before you even plug a battery on this to go flying, and then you lower it down to 30, maybe even 25. Try flying it, and if you feel that it's not responsive enough, then increase as you go, and then from there increase as you get better, more comfortable with it. You cannot try to do flips with this with any less than 80 in stick scaling. If you try with less than 80, you're going to need a lot of altitude, and chances are you're going to crash it. It's not going to go full rotation, and it's going to hit the ground upside down or looking like this or something. It's not going to work. So at least 80 on stick scaling in order to do acrobatics. For yaw, I've got it set to 90, and if you find that it's yawing too fast, then you can reduce it But what you really want to reduce is pitch and roll, right? A yaw, you might like it. It's got quite a nice fast yaw on it. So that's for that. The voltage settings will, the low voltage alarm will be set for 3S battery. So if you put a 2S battery on there, it's going to start beeping, saying the voltage too low, right? And if you put a 4S battery on it, it's never going to beep. You're going to over discharge your battery before it starts to beep. So it's set for 3S at 10.5 volts. It's going to start beeping. And then as far as the last thing is PI settings. The PI settings are all tuned on this. You will not need to touch it. In fact, I would recommend not touching it. And frankly, PI settings on this, there's a very wide range of settings that will work well, and I've got it set right about the middle where it's not going to get any oscillation and no bouncing around when you go to land it. It's perfectly tuned, so I wouldn't bother touching that. So I think that's it. I can't think of anything else I need to mention about this now. Be safe. Make sure you keep the propellers removed when you do all these pre-flight checks. Once you've done all this, then install your propellers and go have fun. Good luck. Cheers.